Distribution Network, where our motto is, don't just make a film,
get people to see it.
That's right. My name is Ted Balaker, co-owner of Courtney Productions, where our motto is making important ideas entertaining. And with me, as always, is my partner in life and in business, Courtney Balaker.
Hello, thank you guys so much for being here. As Ted said, we have a production company here in LA. We make movies, we make documentaries, we do new media stuff, and one of the things we love to talk about with other filmmakers is distribution. So that's what we're doing here today.
Right, and lots of times people talk about distribution in very general terms, and you're kind of like, you're using all these buzzwords. I don't know what you're talking about. Can you actually just speak English? And that's what we're going to try to do today. We're going to get very specific. We're going to cut to the chase and analyze and bring you before your very eyes an actual distribution plan based on an actual pitch from an actual filmmaker who's actually right here today. Not like here, but he's out there. And to guide us through this fascinating journey, we're very lucky to have Melanie Miller, and Courtney will explain how awesome she is.
Melanie is a good friend, which is most important, but she's also one of the best people to be talking about this topic. She actually started her career in distribution, one of the most emerging spaces, which is VOD. She's currently Vice President of Acquisitions and Marketing for Gravitas Ventures. They are a distribution company. They started in VOD, but now they do all sorts of different types of distribution. They have access to over 100 million homes in North America. They release 500 independent films a year. And prior to that, Melanie was the director of the Jackson Hole Film Festival, which I personally thought was one of the finest film festivals in the country. She knows the festival world really, really well. She's been a judge on festivals. She's curated for festivals, and she also makes films, so she can talk about it from that perspective too. Her company Fishbowl Films released a film last year, an independent, called Detour, which is fabulous.
Great.
Please welcome Melanie Miller.
Thank you. That was a lovely introduction.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
I meant it from my heart.
So Melanie, when you and your team distribute, roughly 500 films a year, give us a brief sketch of what does that mean? What do you mean when you say you distribute them? What do you do?
Well, as Courtney mentioned, Gravitas is a distribution company that in the beginning started out as a video on demand distribution company. That's where our hyper focus was on in 2006. And so over the course of the first few years, the president and our CEO struck deals with a number of cable operators, and we became programmers for them. So there's a certain number of hours of content that we have to supply to the cable operators every single month. That number of hours has increased to almost 50 per month. So we have a variety of partners that bring us content for us to distribute. A lot of DVD companies that we work with who didn't have those relationships. We work a lot with filmmakers. We work a lot with sales agents and producers reps. In addition to the cable space, we also work with all of the online platforms that you could think of, be it transactional. An example of that would be iTunes. We also work in the subscription service, which everyone associates that with Netflix, and then the ad-supported window, which is primarily Hulu and other places. But because of that pipeline that they established early on in the company, we have the ability to put out that many films every year.
And what types of films do you look to acquire?
Anything and everything. I mean, we have 10 hours worth of content that we want to put out every month that are primarily horror thriller based. We also do 10 hours worth of documentary content because myself and the CEO are very big advocates for docs, especially coming from the festival world for myself. And
that's really interesting too, because that's a change in this new distribution landscape. It used to be, and I'm speaking because sometimes we make documentaries too, and when you say that to people, like, oh, I make documentaries, and they kind of pat you on the head, and they're like, oh, that's so cute, you don't really want to make money.
No, I mean, documentaries can be extremely successful, especially in the video on demand space. I actually give a lot of kudos to documentary filmmakers because they know how to harness their fan base far better than a narrative filmmaker does because they've had to do it for a much longer period of time. So that's something that really is of interest to us, not just with the documentarians, but also with the feature filmmakers that are doing narratives, is fan base that they have collected. But what we're looking for is, I'll admit it to everyone now, cast is still very much king when it comes to narrative film, but then we also are really interested in, good story, good production value, if there's any sort of partnerships for the documentary that you've established, what kind of fan base do you have already? We really kind of run the gamut, and so it's, when you have almost 50 hours worth to fulfill every single month, like we're looking for good content, but at the same time,
So, good movies rather than bad movies.
correct.
Can't help you there.
I've seen your movie, Cedric.
And it's one of the, you're right, as Courtney said, you're in a very interesting spot because the landscape of distribution, it can either seem exhilarating or overwhelming because it's always changing and there are so many opportunities. It's like you want to make the best of those opportunities, but there's kind of, you wonder which way to go. There's always something new around the corner. What do you make of, I want to get your take on some of the newest platforms, something like a VHX, or even Vimeo is getting bigger into this space. What do you make of those platforms?
I think it's really exciting. I mean, the reason I got into this space in the first place was because I was putting together a business plan for Fishbowl Films, and video on demand kept on coming up, and there was not a lot of information about it 5 years ago, which is approximately when I joined Gravitas. And so I sat down and met with them because I wanted to understand the space, what the waterfall was for the numbers that came in, how they facilitated the deals that they had. I'm very much a sponge. And wanted to be a part of that so that I could understand it and then share it. I think a lot of people know that about me, the filmmakers that we work with. Like, I answer questions like this all day long. It's just kind of part of who I am as a person and how I like to work with the filmmakers. But in specific, to answer your question about Vimeo and VHX, what's really exciting about those companies, and there's others too, there's a company called Yekra that's getting into this space and they're really starting to become very well known, where it's supplying a format and a way for a filmmaker to get their film out into the marketplace directly without going through someone like a Gravitas or another distributor. Vimeo, for example, has the ability to allow you to upload your film if you have a pro account, and then it's a 90-10 split. So they take 10% as a fee to utilize their platform, but then you get 90% of what's made. And you can also do it it's transactional based. So you can do it as a rental, and you can also do it as a download to own, which is also known as electronic sell-through, so EST. So I'll try to make sure I do that from time to time. I'll say what it means.
A lot of TII, talking in initials.
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
And is VHX similar to Vimeo?
VHX is very similar in terms of that too. They have the ability you create an account with them and you can upload your film, and then you have the ability to reach out to your fan base directly. We actually work with them in addition to allowing, sometimes we allow filmmakers to carve that out, but because we are known within that space in the video on demand world, VHX approached us and vice versa. So a film that we worked in tandem with them on was Dave Grohl's documentary Sound City. We had the ability to have Sound City up on VHX as well as all the other platforms that we had it available on at the same time.
And one of the themes that we try to communicate through the Free Minds Film Distribution Network is that distribution isn't something that you don't go and make your movie and then say, okay, now how am I going to distribute this? You think about it from the beginning. Unfortunately, and we've learned the hard way as well, you make something and then you think about it after the fact. So we're very much in this category, trying not to be so much these days. What are some common mistakes you see from filmmakers that you want to say, oh, if you just would have thought about this, this, and this?
Right. Well, I think you've heard me say this before, and I know I've heard you say it in passing too when we're talking in various cocktail receptions. I mean, you have to look at it as like a way to reverse engineer a film. You really have to think backwards these days in terms of like who's your audience and who are you making this film for, and work backwards. And how are you going to actually get the film out into the space? Are you set on wanting to do a theatrical how big is that theatrical going to be? Are you wanting to get it into the video on demand space? Is television more your route? And then once you kind of have an idea of what you think you want that to be, then you can work backwards. So I think I always tell filmmakers, like, do your homework in terms of like what's working in the areas where you want to be, and then go back to the beginning with the story and then work forwards again.
What's an example of an independent film, either that Gravitas worked with or not, that did it the right way, that you think?
There's a lot of independent, I mean, I'll talk about narratives versus a doc, but there's a lot of independent filmmakers who they have become very sophisticated in distribution, I think, over the last 3 to 5 years. Because like myself, I got involved in distribution to understand it, and they've started to attend events such as this, you know, panels to really educate themselves. And so the couple of films that stand out in my mind, we did a movie called The Story of Luke about a year ago, and the filmmaking team not only created a film that spoke to the filmmaker, but also aligned themselves with actors who had significant fan bases, who were going to be willing to support the film once the film was complete. They aligned themselves with companies and various organizations who would help support the film based on the subject matter.
And what was the subject?
The subject matter of the film is actually the lead character has a version of autism or Asperger's. It's never actually very specifically told on purpose, but they align themselves with Autism Speaks before they even started shooting. And so the day of our premiere that we had, one of the very high-level individuals for Autism Speaks came and spoke to the entire audience. They blogged about it. They continue to post about it. I mean, I'm a manager of that Facebook page among a variety of others for our films. That film gets more likes per week than any other film we've ever had. And that's the power of constituency. Yeah, it's the power of constituency, for sure. And, you know, it's nice when you have Seth Green, who has millions of Twitter followers, who's willing to talk about the movie, not only in a traditional sense where he went on places like Craig Ferguson and, you know, I think he did Larry King even, but he also tweeted about the movie. But having Autism Speaks validate the subject matter, because
and the handling
of the subject matter in such a positive way that they really got behind it, and it's been super helpful for the film and for the distributor, and also for them, you know, in terms of like getting foreign to be interested in the movie too.
Awesome.
So that's a good example.
Yeah. Well, we want our filmmaker to be a good example, right?
Yeah.
So we are very pleased to be to bring you Mr. Wes Kemp, everybody.
Come on up here, Wes.
Hi. Thanks, you guys, for having me.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Wes is a great guy whom we've known for a while, and he has a project that we think is really interesting and we think is commercially viable. We're going to have to run it by the Melanie Miller test, which is what you're going to
reality check.
Yeah,
This could be a very awkward exchange.
Isn't that exciting?
And which makes for great TV.
Now, obviously, Gravitas, they don't get involved with films at the development stage. They only acquire films once they've been made. But
so you're a very lucky guy.
I am.
Yeah,
I
to get
know.
this meeting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do today, though, is use Mel's expertise to listen to his project and basically ask him questions and give Wes things to start thinking about now, like you just described with the story of Luke, things that maybe he can start engaging in now and start building a distribution plan before he even launches into making his movie. So,
because our hope is that if we get really specific, then you all at home and the studio audience, of course, can kind of learn through these very specific steps and apply them to your films and get all kinds of eyeballs on your films as well.
yeah.
You can learn from my stumbles and mistakes. Right?
Right. And if he screws up, we can make fun of him.
Even better.
Right, exactly.
Don't screw up.
Well, I trust you're a good editor too. You know, you can edit anything.
Wow,
right?
you are
Right.
not very wise, Wes. But why don't you pitch this project?
All right. Well, the name of my project is called Hefty, and I've got a little still here to get everybody kind of in the mood. And it's called Hefty. Being a bully can have heavy consequences. So my story centers around school bullying. And it centers around 4 main characters: Troy Loveland, Billy Hawks, Tim Lilly, and Rebecca Logan. And Troy is the protagonist in the project, in the movie, and he's the typical Mr. Everything, star quarterback, Mr. Popular in high school. He has the beautiful girlfriend. And Billy and Tim are his, over the years, have traditionally been the victims of his abuse. You know, Troy has not been too nice to them over the years. So we open, the film opens up with, you know, a football game where Troy, you know, we set up the character to where he saves the day, winning the football game. And everybody, you know, he's a school hero. Well, when they return to school the next Monday, as typical, he and his friend Roger stuff Billy and Tim in their lockers and throw stink spray in the lockers and, you know, really make their life miserable again for the first day. So at this point, Billy and Tim, they're getting a little tired of it because it keeps happening over and over again. And to make matters worse, it's the same day as the presidential fitness exam. So our whole crew, oh yeah, those are great.
On that road.
Yeah, exactly. So of course, you know, we get introduced to all the characters of the school, all the different groups in the school. And Billy and Tim, again, are having trouble with their sit-ups. So Troy and Roger take the opportunity to pull another prank on them to make them the laughing stock, the fact that they can't do sit-ups very well. So flash forward later on in the day, Billy and Tim go home and they discover that Billy's grandfather is moving in with the family. And Billy is a Native American, of Native American ancestry. And Billy's grandfather used to be one of the tribal chiefs. So as Billy and Tim are carrying in Billy's grandfather's stuff to move in, they discover one of his ancient tribal scripts that contains spells and things like that, which Billy, he doesn't really believe in that stuff because it's, you know, his grandfather's, you know, whatever. But Tim decides it'd be a good idea to take the script, so he stuffs it under his shirt. Well, later in the week at the Halloween dance, Troy decides to pull his ultimate prank. And Tim and Billy again are the butt of the joke, and Troy puts super glue on the toilet seat of the school dance. So as it would happen, Tim gets stuck to the toilet seat and he can't get off, and Billy has to pull him off the toilet seat with the toilet seat stuck to his rear end, and the fire department comes, and it's a big humiliating thing that Troy happens to record on Vimeo or YouTube, so he can now distribute that to the entire school.
You've already got a partner there.
Exactly,
You know?
Exactly.
Can you
So-
incorporate VHX? too?
Maybe so, yeah. So, you know, I guess he's a little bit of an entrepreneur himself. So that's it. Billy and Tim have had enough. So they decide to take his grandfather's spirit script. They go home and, in an ancient ritual, cast a spell on Troy. And little does Troy know that the spell involves, over the next few days, him becoming morbidly obese. So, as flash forward in the script, the next day, Troy decides he has to run a race for charity, and he just doesn't feel right. You know, he wakes up and he sees, you know, kind of parts of his body are growing, and he can't really complete the race. So he cheats as usual. He hops on the bus and he goes to the finish line and he finishes third, and everybody doesn't think anything's wrong. But football practice is a little different. He starts having trouble playing football, something he's so good at, and the coach is really on him because he can't complete the passes. He's fumbling the ball. You know, he can't move as fast as he does normally. So later that week, we get to the next football game that Friday night, and Troy just blows it. You know, he has a horrible game. And to make matters worse, the coach pulls him and he says, well, I'm going to put your best friend Roger in at quarterback. And Roger comes back to save the day, saves the day. So Troy is no longer Mr. Everything. He's starting to get ridiculed by people in the stands. And by this time, as the week has gone on, every day he flips on the light in his room, something else is bigger. You know, his stomach is larger, his chest is larger, he's getting fat, and he doesn't know what's going on. So it all comes to a head, and the coach of the football team kicks Troy off the football team and sends him to PE, which is, you know, kind of humiliating for the star athlete. So he meets Coach Hines, who is your, you know, kind of, he's not really happy-go-lucky, but he's kind of a bumbling coach for PE, but he's also the wrestling coach for the school, who the wrestling team is horrible. And he's kind of a la maybe like a Vince Vaughn type character. He's able to make these speeches that kind of make no sense, you know, to get everybody riled up, you know, let's go get him, but nobody knows really what he's talking about.
But they're inspiring.
Yeah, but they're inspiring. And like, what? Okay, let's go, yeah. So Troy gets demoted to PE, which is humiliating. And one day while he's in PE, they're doing yoga. So, which he has a horrible time doing yoga. And Troy happens to fall on a couple of girls that are next to him. And he's so large at this point that the girls can't get up. So he's basically smothering them. Meanwhile, Coach Hines sees this and says, that's it, that's my guy, I have the plan. Troy, I need you to be on the wrestling team. Right? So he says, we've got a new member of the wrestling team, and he has this wonderful new move called the waffle press. And all the waffle press consists of is him just grabbing his opponent, laying forward, and he just lays on them for the pin. So to much chagrin, Troy doesn't want to participate, but the coach talks him into being on the wrestling team. And his first match is very successful. He ends up winning the match, and but the drawback is he seriously kind of hurts his opponent because he's so heavy. So there's a whole hubbub at the school the next day about, is he too large to wrestle now? So to put the cherry on top, his quote-unquote best friends from the football team have decided to play a prank on Troy. When he goes and opens his locker, all these double D bras fall out and boxes of Weight Watchers. And they say, you know, it's just part of it, and you know, everybody's laughing at Troy, so now he's the butt of the joke. So Troy needs some time to reflect, so he decides, I'm going to go to the top of the school just to relax. But he locks himself out. So he's up on the roof of the school, and everybody thinks it's a suicide attempt because he's so down on his luck. So the fire department comes, it's on the news, Troy's up there, this guy, they think he's going to jump off the building, kill himself, but that's not the case at all. And Billy and Tim are really worried that they've done something really bad now. That, you know, this is our fault, we've put this spell on this guy and we've totally, you know, changed his life. So we need to come clean. So Rebecca, who is Troy's childhood friend, she is the one that goes up to the roof and really kind of figures out what's going on, talks him down, and it gives them a chance to reconnect since childhood, and she decides that she wants to help him try and, you know, lose weight and get back in shape, and, you know, to help him, you know, kind of get things turned around, so to speak. So Billy and Tim decide to meet Troy at the local pizza shop, and they come clean, and they tell Troy that you know, we're the ones that kind of put this curse on you. And, you know, he really doesn't, yeah, sorry, you know, but we're real sorry. We've learned our lesson. So Troy is not too happy about it, but they all decide to go see Grandpa. So they go see Grandpa, and the first thing Grandpa tells them to do is really need to stop messing around with the spirits, you know, because they didn't know, you know, what they were doing. But Grandpa gives Troy certain things that he has to accomplish in order to reverse this curse. So he has to heal one's heart, he has to find true love, and he has to do a series of good deeds. So Troy goes full bore and like, this is the answer, we're going to try and you know, I'm going to try to do these good deeds and everything's going to be fine. But Grandpa has one stipulation, that if you can't accomplish this, the curse has to be passed on to someone else. So Troy goes full bore trying to accomplish his good deeds. He you know, does things. He wants to buy kids some ice cream at the park. The only problem is the moms think he's a child predator, so they start pelting him with toys and run him off. He wants to help an old man, you know, put his coins in the car wash, but he thinks he's trying to steal his money, so he gets beaten with a cane. So no matter what Troy does, he just can't get anything right. So his good deeds are a failure. On the same time this is going on, he has to get ready to train for this huge match against the state champion, because now he's so successful as a wrestler that that he's made his way to the state championship. So Rebecca is helping him to train for the big match. So Troy can't get his good deeds done, so he goes to Billy and Tim, and he says, you know, we have to pass the curse on to someone else. So they recreate the ritual, you know, with a bonfire and the ancient tribal ritual, but at the last minute, Troy says, I can't do this. You know, I can't, because he was trying to pass it to his former best friend, Roger. So it's really the moment that Troy realizes, you know, that whatever I am, I'm enough for me, and he kind of realizes that moment of self-worth. Also, it's that point where Billy and Tim realize that he made a better decision than they did because they essentially turned into what they hated. So the next day is the big wrestling match, and Troy wakes up. He's not feeling well. He goes downstairs to see his father, who he doesn't have a good relationship with. And his father's getting ready for the match, and he asks his dad, what are you doing? He said, well, my son's wrestling in the state championship. So it's the first time his dad's really gone to see him, you know, do anything in a athletic venue like that. So Troy goes back to bed, but he doesn't show up for the match. So the coach is worried. Billy and Tim decide they have to be the ones to go get him because they don't know what's going on. So they go to Troy's house. Troy is sweating profusely. He's just not feeling good, but somehow they get him in the car. They get him to the match. They put some Tylenol, you know, in him and give him a shot of like 5-hour energy or something, and everybody's just at least relieved that he's there. So he faces this other wrestler, Blister Buchanan, who is your typical roid monster, you know, the toughest opponent Troy's faced. And he can't use his traditional waffle press because Blister is so strong. But throughout the match, Troy keeps sweating and sweating, and everything just gets so wet. The mat gets in, like this little puddle of water is on the mat, like they're almost in a swimming pool. And even one point, Troy tries to do the waffle press, so he grabs Blister and he kind of runs, and when he jumps on him and drops, Blister shoots out just like a rocket right into the crowd because everything's so slippery.
Gross.
Yeah, it is kind of gross, yeah. It is kind of gross. But it culminates to where Blister goes in and lifts Troy up for the finishing move, and we fade out. And Troy comes up and he sees he's in an ambulance. So he goes in and out of consciousness. He finally wakes up, and Grandpa Hawks is in front of him. And Grandpa Hawks is the one that says, you have truly learned to see with your hawk eyes. You know, always remember to see things as they truly are. Grandpa gives him the message that, you know, everything's going to be fine, and he's actually accomplished his good deeds. So Troy goes out of consciousness, wakes up in the hospital room, and his whole family and friends are around him, and they actually tell him that he won the match. And we don't really get to see the film of him winning yet, but he's shocked. His father's there. His relationship with his father has been healed, so he has healed his father's heart. He's achieved self-worth, and the end of the scene, we close out, and Troy looks out the window, and he sees a hawk sitting perched on a tree looking back at him, kind of a sign from Grandpa. The last scene of the film is Troy is being honored as the state champion because he's won. He's back to his normal self, and they give him the state champion trophy. But at the end, as Billy and Tim are walking to their lockers, they open their locker up, and there's his Troy's trophy, and he has a note on it that says, "Thanks for pushing back, guys." You know, to my two favorite guys. Cool. And essentially, from there we fade out, and that's pretty much the arc of the movie. And so it's about friendship and healing and self-worth.
What would the genre be? Who's the audience?
Well, the audience the genre is comedic. It's definitely a comedy, you know, once you read the script. And the genre, or the audience is going to be, you know, your 18 to, I'd say, 40-year-olds. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'll probably get a really good kick out of it. And bullying, I think, is a really timely topic, you know, that's going on right now.
I disagree.
Okay, well. Because
yeah.
you were the bully, right?
Whoa, this is over.
He did play football in high school.
Next question.
Yeah. I just took like 4 pages of notes.
Okay. Sorry, I was a little long-winded.
No, it's good.
Now I'm not sure if I want his film to succeed.
It's anti-bullying. Don't bully him, Ted.
Melanie, how can you get him, what do you want, $100 million?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great. Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, my first question, normally my first question after I hear somebody pitch their story is, where did you draw from on this? Like, is it personal? Like, were you Troy? Were you Billy and Tim? Like, who are
Ted
you
and I
in this
grew up
story?
together.
He's my brother!
No, I was actually bullied some growing up. Is kind of what I drew from. And some of it would be physical, but other times it was just a lot of verbal bullying, and you're kind of made fun of a lot, cast as kind of a pariah a lot of times at the school. So that's kind of what gave me the idea. And then I read a play, or worked on a play even as an actor called Fat Pig by Neil Butte. And it's a great play, but it deals a lot with the social stigmas of being overweight. And I wanted to tackle that theme as well in the movie about how, even though we may be overweight or have a certain appearance about us, we're all kind of given some natural talents, natural gifts, and we have to, use those gifts. And that, people shouldn't be, maybe ostracized just based on their physical appearance. So, and I was a fat kid, so. Yeah.
I find that hard to believe, but
I was. Actually, I was. So I was made fun of too, Yeah.
I mean, I believe you, but it's just don't look like you were heavy.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what would you say to him? What are your first thoughts hearing this, Mel?
Well, my first thought is, so obviously it's a story that comes from the heart for you, and you wrote it. What is your plan in terms of, do you want to direct it? You just said you're an actor. Do you want to be in it? Like, this is where I start kind of like at the end.
Right. Well,
work
the
backwards.
first would be no and no. I wanted to write it without having myself in mind as an actor, because I just wanted to put it down on the page. So, I didn't really write myself a part in it, and I think something like this would be in much better hands having someone else direct it. So it would be a situation of probably selling it and handing it off to a production company to really have them take it from there.
Okay.
And I could, of course, I would like to have any kind of creative input, that they would like for me to have, but that would be kind of the avenue I'd want to go.
So with that in mind, then, is it okay if I speak to like the independent kind of route versus the studio route? Just because I think for the purposes of this exercise, we would probably all be going more independent than, not that I don't hope that Warner Brothers wants to buy your projects, but
I mean,
call
me.
You know what I mean? Or any studio for that matter, but I think for the purposes of how I could kind of speak to it, it would probably be better if I do it from the independent perspective. So my first thing would be, and my next question would be, is that do you have representation as a writer?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Does that agency have a packaging department?
I would say no, not at the moment. It's
Okay.
it's kind of just my single agent works with me to promote me as a writer and an actor.
And Mel,
both,
explain the packaging department.
So there's various levels of agencies out there within the entertainment industry, and so there's the very large agencies such as Creative Artists Agency, which is CAA or ICM, and all these different companies that are agencies that have not only a representation for actors and writers and directors, but then they also have various divisions where they have a packaging department where they help facilitate bringing potential financing together, as well as maybe some actors from the agency. There might be a director as well, and that's why I ask, because if you did have an agency like that would be my first recommendation, is turn to your agent and say, can we get a meeting with the packaging department? Because they don't always necessarily know what's going on with each other's clients. Since that's not the case, one of the things that I recommend to a lot of people is, do you have the ability to get a producer's rep, or do you have a law firm who might have a producer's rep in-house? And the reason why I ask that question is because then they can kind of act as someone to help facilitate those things. So do you have an attorney?
I do not.
Larry?
I do not have an official attorney.
Okay.
It's kind of one of those where I have friends that are attorneys.
Got
and
it.
Kind of
Got it.
handle things, but not an official one.
So that's something that I think everyone should always be protected. And have you registered the?
Yes, it is
Okay, so it's
registered,
registered
yeah.
with the WGA. Okay, so then the next thing I always like to tell filmmakers is it's really smart to start to determine like audition attorneys, because they're going to be with you for the long haul of the project. They might handle the negotiation of your selling of the project. They might handle the negotiation of, any sort of rights that are entailed in that, like in terms of, finance agreements for people. It just depends. There's so many different avenues, and so having a really good attorney on board with you is super helpful, because you seem like a very trusting person, which is a good thing. But I
always works in Los
also,
Angeles.
but I also think that people need to protect themselves to some
right,
degree
yeah.
with paper. So and it's definitely worth having somebody to represent you on those things. So those are some things that I would first say. But then to kind of get into the more creative kind of like what's next in terms of, have you started pitching it to production companies through your agent? Because the nice thing is you do have an agent who could potentially set up some meetings for you to pitch it.
That's what we're working on right now.
You're working on
is
that right now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And have you kind of, and this is again going back to the reverse engineering kind of way my brain works, is have you looked at other films, they call them comps, very much like the real estate business, where comparable films that were produced by certain production companies that might make sense for you to go to. So
Right.
that's something that I like to recommend is, I always tell, the filmmakers, like, do your homework in terms of like, not only for potential the business plan, but also like trying to target people who obviously are like-minded and like this type of project who might want to get behind it.
What do you say, Wes? Have you?
Well, I do. I
looked
have
at
looked at
comps?
comp films. Like we would talk before. It's as far as pitching it, I look at it as a cross between. There's an old film called Lucas that was back in the '80s.
yeah.
Corey Haim, a mix between Lucas and Shallow Hal. So those would be like the two of the comps that I would look at.
Right. Okay. No, that's good, because then looking at their budgets, and then obviously I think Shallow Hal was like pretty big studio money, but
Yeah, it was I think 40 million budget. I think. Yeah.
So.
Explain why is it important to look at comps?
Well, it's important to look at comps to just kind of see not only what the budget was for the film, but also to see how they performed, or at least what's been reported within the industry. Because when you're presenting an idea, a lot of times I tell people that's why it's called show business. Like you're the show part and I'm the business part. And you have to prove to the business part, why does it make sense to actually invest in the film and figure out ways to convince people to give you money to make the project. So having something to compare it to that they might then be like, oh my God, I loved that movie.
Right.
Like I think when we were outside talking before we came in, I was like, The Bodyguard, like I love that movie. And
Bodyguard.
it's old, it just shows how old I am. That movie's like from 1980. But that film it resonates with me. And just so you know, this type of story resonates with me too, because I was actually bullied in high school.
Yeah. It's
Yeah, I was,
Thanks,
but
Ted.
I
I get it right. Yeah.
Courtney, it's actually Courtney.
Oh, it's Courtney.
It's Courtney.
I'm the worst.
I stuck to dudes.
It's Courtney. No, but it's like I love the line at the end where it's like push back, because I finally did. I was like, fine, meet me in the hallway at 3:00.
Right.
Like,
So
just
you-
show up.
You threw down?
Yeah, I threw down.
Well, let's get into that. right?
Punch him? Did you punch him in the nose?
Courtney.
Her face met the grate of a locker. Let's just
Yeah.
Right on.
So I never actually punched her, but no one ever.
And it
bothered
probably
me.
stopped. Yeah. I bet
Yeah.
after that,
Oh yeah. It did.
Right on.
But so these types of stories definitely speak to me, and that's when you're doing the research in terms of like who you're reaching out to. That's why I say, because you never know, it like might hit on something for them. And there's so many different hooks that you have. So a couple of things that I would recommend is there's not a lot of Native American content out there.
Right.
And I know that, you know, you're going on the comedic route and there can be definite like apprehensions from tribes to get involved. And so it sounds like you're pretty generic in terms of that. But there are potential avenues for programs and labs to take the script through. Like actually the Sundance Institute has a lab specifically for Native American content. Okay. And because of the fact that you have a portion of the project to that, I would recommend looking into that.
Okay.
I would also recommend, because there is a lot of money in the Native American culture when it comes time to actually being able to create a project like this, you know, running it past someone who might be in the industry, but who also is of Native American descent. Like I have a friend, I think I've actually introduced Courtney to her before, not because of a Native American project, but just she's a pretty well-known producer. Her name's Heather Ray.
Okay.
And she did a movie called Frozen River, and she's done a bunch of other stuff, and she actually is of Native American descent. And so, you know, reaching out to people like that to kind of get feedback, because you want them to be your advocates, you know, for the project. So that's something that I always like. And then it's also coming up with, you know, there's so many different things in the project that you could align yourself with.
Well, I was doing some investigation into looking at some anti-bullying leagues or anti-bullying organizations, you know, and maybe, I don't know, partnering with them on some level.
There's so many different organizations that you could potentially align yourself with. Like, I'm actually glad that I brought up the story of Luke, because the way that that director and that producer aligned themselves early on, they actually had the ability to build awareness, and it wasn't necessarily financial commitment from those organizations, but it's very likely that there were people who had money who might have had a child with autism or Asperger's, who heard about it through there, who then helped facilitate funding for the project. The same thing could be true for you. So I think being able to start building those relationships early on is really smart, because I actually have a coworker who works with me at Gravitas who was responsible for the social media for the Bully Project. That has like 640,000 plus, you know, Facebook fans.
Wow.
And even though that film has been out and then some for, I don't know, a couple of years now, they're constantly still managing and updating, and it's because of all the organizations that they align themselves with. And so that film just continues to make money. And it's also a way to start building a fan base before you even start.
Sorry to interrupt, but I mean, that's one of the reasons we chose this format to do today, because I really think that you can't just be an actor. You can't just be a screenwriter, and you just can't do that anymore. What you have to do these days is you have to be your own corporation. And maybe you're not going to direct it or produce it, but if you can go to a production company and say, look what I've already built. I have these relationships. It's almost like finding sponsors before you pitch your TV show to cable. I have Johnson & Johnson who wants to do it. Like, that's less work for the production company to have to do, right? You've already created basically a base that they don't have to go out and invent the wheel to do. And I think that's one of the things I'm finding in the industry now. Like, when you can come to the table with, look what I have, you're a much stronger candidate for consideration as opposed to just having a great script.
Right, it's very true, especially in the independent space. Yes.
Right.
And get into what are you bringing? You're bringing a certain level of guaranteed ticket sales or VOD sales. You're getting what, publicity? You know that once the film comes out, you'll have all these people who have an interest in getting the word out.
Right. I mean, one thing that I would say, and you know, I talked to Courtney and Ted about this a lot, and I brought it up I spoke at the Produce By conference a couple weeks ago, and you know, there's a role that's becoming more and more prominent in the independent space. It's called a producer of marketing and distribution, and that person gets involved in your project really early on, helping to come up with these kinds of ideas and helping facilitate so that you do have the ability to put together a package where, very much like I asked at the very beginning, like, is there a packaging division where they help facilitate these things. That person helps you start to put together this package of, we have a project, we also have 5 other things lined up in terms of if we actually get the funding. And it actually brings potential financing to the project too, because you've shown the investors that you're pounding the pavement for the project and you're building a fan base. I've actually I just read this yesterday actually, where a filmmaker used crowdfunding to actually raise the money just to hire a producer of marketing and distribution for their project.
Wow. Okay.
And what that did was it simultaneously not only raised the money to get the producer of marketing and distribution, but it also allowed them to start building a fan base for the movie really early on in the Kickstarter campaign. So the only thing, and there's so many different avenues for those types of crowdfunding now. There's Kickstarter, there's Indiegogo, there's a new one called Seed and Spark that they actually vet the projects a little bit. You can't just upload it, you have to be vetted by them. And so we're working, and I've worked with all of them before. So, I mean, that's something, and that's just like filmmakers thinking outside the box. Like that's the thing that you have to keep doing, is you have to think outside the box. And establishing that team really early on who's gonna help you like get people excited about the possibility of either writing a check or, another thing, I've seen people do is like, all right, we need to raise $15,000 to bring on a producer of marketing and distribution and a casting director. Or, because cast is still going to be a driving force behind the project outside of like really good story. And so those are things that, I think are definitely ways to kind of get the ball rolling.
You mentioned thinking outside the box, and Troy does the Waffle Press.
The Waffle Press, yes.
Yeah.
How about partnering with the Waffle House?
Yeah.
Get some of that.
You might have to
get some
call
of
it
that waffle
house
money.
instead of hefty.
We're in Los Angeles, so probably nobody knows what the Waffle House is.
Yeah, right. Oh, the Waffle
Just
House,
imagine Denny's, but not quite as classy.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I wrote down, there's so many other hooks that you have in I'm really glad you guys picked this one, because not only do you have the bullying component, you have, the fact that there's so much going on about kids in weight right now. I mean, there's a documentary out right now called Fed Up, and it talks about child obesity, and the culprit in this film is sugar, and it's just like aligning yourselves with potentially, other films and other filmmakers where you help build awareness for what you're trying to do.
Right.
You have the Native American component. You said, early on, like football and wrestling, and I mean, there's so many different, you could reach out to organizations and schools now, like, hey, when we shoot this, depending on where you're going to go, and obviously there's tax credit, that becomes a whole nother aspect of the pre-production phase, but reaching out to schools and hey, we are shooting for 4 days for a high school, we need your football team, there'll be extras, and there's so many different things that you could tie into. I mean, the fact that there's a Halloween component, that's another hook that people, even though it's one moment, it's significant because every single aspect of the movie, you can try and figure out ways to kind of stunt when it's time to distribute the movie. Like,
You mean like, I'm sorry, but like in terms of like Halloween, maybe that's a release window strategy?
or it
you're
might be
talking about?
because it's like the movie starts in the fall, like it might be a good idea to have some sort of alignment, or it might be to like, and this is like really far down the road, but it's like depending on when it comes out, do you align your home video window during the Halloween time frame, and then maybe, we work with Hulu all the time and they do Huluween. And so maybe it gets really highlighted on Hulu during the Halloween season, which is obviously October. But there's just, and then the cyberbullying component, then you have like the mystical, magical elements. Like there's a lot of stuff going on that you could be like aligning yourself with at the very early stages.
Okay.
So we're in the early stages now. Do you have any thoughts of the next stages? So let's say he gets funded, he's in pre-production and then production, post-production. What should Wes be thinking about? Let's say he reaches out to these different groups, the childhood obesity groups, anti-bullying groups, and so on. What should he be thinking about in these other stages?
Well, I think depending on, I think one of the things you want to do is you want to get a line producer, obviously, to do like a really solid breakdown of your budget and the schedule for you to figure out what you really think that you would make the movie for. Finding producers who are talented in that space and that budgetary range. I also think that you have a couple of roles that stand out to me that, again, I keep saying the word stunt, but it's 5 years of working in the industry of distribution where it's like we're constantly finding ways to like stunt to highlight something.
Yeah.
But there's some stunt casting roles. Like his father doesn't seem to be on screen all that much. Troy's dad.
He is. He has a bigger.
Oh, he is.
Yeah,
Okay.
I couldn't really delve into it
No,
as
that's
much because
it.
of the time. But
That's
yeah,
okay.
he
But
does.
there's, it seemed to me like if he had the ability to be like work for a week, like that could be a pretty well-known person where you pay a significant amount of money to. That helps for your foreign sales. And I actually want to jump to that for a second in terms of some decisions on how to figure things out. Like comedy and drama can be difficult in foreign unless you have people of note. But what we sometimes think is good domestically does not translate in the foreign space at all. And I think establishing a relationship with a foreign sales agent who can provide you with solid, like numbers of who translates to what, which territories are looking for this type of project, et cetera, is really, really important. I also think the PE coach would be a great stunted role.
Right. That's the way he's written, actually.
Yeah. So those are a couple of things, but I think...
And that's a good point, Mel, because a lot of times we think, and if you're talking independent film, you think, oh, well, I don't have the money to cast an A-list actor, perhaps. But in speaking with you in the past, I think filmmakers can often be surprised as to who is a big deal in Germany, and I'm not just talking about the Hoff.
Right.
I was just going to say,
right.
Just make sure you say David Hasselhoff.
Right, but I mean, there are people who are much more, approachable or gettable than the usual A-listers we would all name, who do mean something in the big territories, right? How would Wes go about thinking through that?
This is where having an attorney
helps
a lot, or having someone like a producer's rep or a producer who has relationships in those areas already. Because I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you right now.
It's okay. Throw away.
But no, I mean, having those types of relationships where you could approach and meet with some foreign sales agents and talk about the project, because foreign sales agents, that world is changing a lot right now too, because the buying has changed pretty significantly over the last few years and what's being spent and where. Attorneys can make those introductions. Producers already have established relationships. Bringing on someone who may have already done a project like this, who has relationships with people, all those things help. I caution people to like pound the pavement at AFM because they're very standoffish. Unless you have a buyer badge at AFM, they really don't want to take your meetings. And I've seen it more often than not when filmmakers are like walking the halls. The companies that you're getting into to have those conversations about foreign aren't necessarily the ones who are right for your film. They're just as hungry as you are, so they're willing to take the meeting. And I don't trust a lot of foreign sales agents, to be honest with you, because a lot of times, and this is where it's like the devil's in the details, where they'll charge you, you're almost paying for them to go to Cannes and AFM and things, and you have to be really careful of that versus finding someone, like I have a few foreign sales agents that I really, really like, and there's one in particular that I work with a decent amount, and he's just a solid guy who gives real estimates, who, he'll tell you if he doesn't think that he's the right person for the job. And I'd rather have someone like that on a project than someone who's just willing to tell you anything you want to hear, and then you actually don't get to make the movie. But I think having a foreign perspective is really helpful in today's day and age for an independent film, because the MGs that are being paid for independent films right now are not, the $10 million buy at Sundance, they rarely happen. Like rarely happen. I've had filmmakers of late say to me like, hey, like we got an offer for like $500,000, and I'm like, take it. Based on, what rights they're looking to take on or what, and you have to be really, really cognizant of how those deals are structured too. And that's why I, again, go back to like have a lawyer, have a producer, have a producer who understands.
Right, yeah.
It's just, having somebody who really understands all the details of it.
Right.
It's like there's no way that, Francis Ford Coppola even said this at the Produce By conference like 2 weeks ago. He's like, I didn't want to be a producer. Like, I'm a storyteller. He's like, but I was forced to become a producer because I was on set and I was like, well, we need to be able to do this. And how am I going to get it done if I don't step up to the plate? And so, I think it was great for him to say that, because then everyone else in the room was like, oh, we should probably start to understand these things too.
Right.
And he's been in the business a lot longer than most of us.
Right.
Although I think he makes more money selling wine.
We've been,
I've heard it's good though.
So let's, we'll get to Q&A in just a moment, but we've thrown a lot of things at Wes. We've done a lot of brainstorming, which has been great. Let's leave Wes with a few things, very specific action items to do. The moment you leave the studio, Wes, you will do these things.
In the parking lot.
Yeah.
Call the lawyer.
If you're out there, if you guys are out there,
lawyers in the audience.
Yeah, lawyer up.
if we wrap this and he's out there like sipping a
talk to him.
Chardonnay, just punch him in the gut and say, get out there and do what Melanie told you to do. So let me, I've been dutifully jotting down a lot of your great ideas, Mel, so I will throw some things at you, and then let's kind of zero in on maybe the top 3 or top 5. So audition attorneys is a possibility. Approach Sundance Lab. They have a special lab for Native American content. Approach Native American organizations, get feedback from them. Reach out to anti-bully groups, get their feedback. Crowdfunding to hire a PMD, another TII, talking in initials, which is a producer of marketing and producer of marketing and distribution.
Did I not say that out? I'm sorry if I didn't.
No, you did. You did. I'm just kind of like resetting it.
Okay, got it.
And then another group to align with groups, childhood obesity groups, football, wrestling, perhaps, WWE. Right, I attended WrestleMania 9, so if you have any questions about King Kong Bundy,
All right,
I can help you with that.
We'll need a choreographer, right?
Right.
Actually, no
Right.
joke,
Yeah.
if you got a wrestler to play the PE coach,
Yeah.
Oh, I've
yeah.
heard it's pretty
There you go.
popular, that WWE.
Yeah, WDE stuff.
Yeah.
like
The Rock.
there's
The Rock, yeah. Well, he's kind of like, I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, he
I'm too
doesn't do
good.
that anymore.
Halloween, go talk to Halloween, see what he has to say. Line producer and foreign
sales agent.
foreign sales agent. And Mel, give us a quick definition of what a foreign sales agent does.
So a foreign sales agent will either look at a treatment or look at a script of your project, and they will do a breakdown and analysis of the various territories that they're potentially going to represent for you and tell you what they might be able to get for that territory. A lot of times territories are sold for all rights. Just very recently, I've actually seen deals where they're like, oh, well, they only want television, so we'll just give them TV. And then you still have other rights to retain. MGs vary, and that's a minimum guarantee. Make sure to say that. Yeah, I know. They vary greatly, and it's a lot of what foreign is based on who's in it and genre. So, and it's good to just get a sense, because the foreign sales agents know what's going on at the market. Berlin kicks it off, and then Cannes, and then there's a variety of others outside of the entire world, and then there's also AFM, which is here in Santa Monica in the beginning of November.
Great. So you've mentioned a lot of things. I touched on them. What should Wes do today? And don't dilly-dally, Wes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What are some of the things he should do? Let's give him an action item list. What should he do?
Do you have a Facebook page for the movie already?
No, I do not.
Start one.
Yes.
Do you have a tagline?
The tag.
Do you have a tagline?
Yeah, the tagline. Because being a bully can have heavy consequences.
It's a great tagline.
You like it? Melanie approved?
It's a great tagline.
Right on.
Thank you.
Facebook page with
So
tagline.
get a Facebook page.
Twitter, I imagine a
One.
Twitter account.
Twitter account's good. You know what's becoming really, really popular and actually really good for the demographic that you're looking to hit is an Instagram account.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, more so than Facebook. But it's
Okay.
good to have Facebook because of the older demo. But Instagram has become really popular with younger generation in ways for people to follow.
Okay.
So I would say those would, and the reason why you want to do it is then that's another way to just start to build up the fan base, even if it's just your friends and family and everyone in this audience. You know, that's at least 100, right?
Right. Exactly.
I like it, Wes. I
Thank
like
you.
it.
That'd be
That's a
great.
guarantee.
But
Perfect.
yeah, I mean, I think that those things are good. Like those are easy action items to start with.
Okay.
You know, and then
Building interest groups. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
you commented, you phrased it that way one time as just, almost looking at, the audience and building an interest group for the film. So I thought that was really a
well, and I
Constituency.
think
Constituency, yeah.
finding organizations, even if it's just doing the research of organizations that hit on some of the bullet points, that you can then start to reach out to.
Okay, so number one, get a Facebook page. Number two, get an Instagram account. Number three, research interest groups, right?
Interest groups, organizations that would have some sort of connection to the film and hopefully get behind it.
Such as?
Such as childhood obesity. What was it called? The childhood obesity organization, or?
Oh, I was referring to a movie that was, and that's the other thing I would do too, is I would research films that have significant fan bases that touch on the same subject matters. So like the Bully Project,
Right.
I could introduce you to the kid who manages that website.
Perfect.
You know what I mean? Like, that's easy. He's in the office right next door to me.
So take Mel out for drinks.
Schmooze and the-
with Ted's credit card.
Whatever it takes.
We'll have a
I have.
Without me. it
You
would be
never
no-
know, like, I've heard some really crazy stories about people who had an idea or a script and went, oh no, and went to these organizations. I'm not saying this will happen for you, but you could fundraise
Yeah.
this way. Like if you went to an organization and said, this is my project, this is what I want to do, this is what it's about, you never know. One of these people at the childhood obesity groups or the Bully Project could say, there's this guy, there's this woman, she wants to get in the film business.
Right.
I mean, I've heard of a lot of independent stories that, very, very unlikely avenues led to either fundraising or just audience building. And I think buzz matters. I think buzz makes a huge difference.
Well, and it's also, I mean, there's organizations out there. I just got invited to a cocktail reception for an organization that's started by a production company and a variety of pretty high, powerful individuals where they want to make movies that are positive and show how to be better. Like a good example is like Rudy. Like that's,
Right.
like they want to be able to show films like Rudy or be a part of films like Rudy so that they can show for the next generation, like this is why we want to entertain you with like positive content. So, and there's companies like that out there all the time, there's like, and because of the younger demographic too, like researching companies that make those kinds of films too. I mean, like Walden Media would be one. The organization that I'm talking about that's doing this event is called True Spark.
Okay.
There's, just kind of digging into all of that and just having a list. And then, when you're feeling like, all right, I'm cool with making 2 cold calls today, because they're not fun.
No.
But I don't like doing them either, but I do them all the time. And just kind of like ticking off your list and saying, okay, like this makes sense, or who can I talk to, or just, I think, and that's why building a fan base online can be super helpful too, because then there might be somebody who says exactly like what I just said, like, oh, there's an organization that I've heard about, you should check it out. It's the more you talk about it, the more people will.
The more links you make,
Yeah.
basically.
What about, you mentioned auditioning attorneys as very important and very exciting. Would you put that high up on the list, and how would he go about doing that?
I would get referrals from filmmakers that you know.
Okay.
I would, I know Ted and Courtney have a really great attorney. I could rattle off at least 2 law firms that are really great. And just being able to, I think that more often than not, people don't realize that they're happy to take the meetings because they're looking for the next round of clients as well. It's just, and they have junior executives that are, potentially going to be who would handle the project. But, that's, I think, I think it's important.
Absolutely.
You mentioned a foreign sales agent. How would he go about, what would an action item be to like just go get one, okay?
Just
go get one.
Yeah. Craigslist.
Craigslist. I think, the first way you could do it is, again, always trust people that you know within the industry. So referrals, I think, are huge. I think that, there are, if you go on and you look at films that are comparable to yours, and then you go on IMDb Pro, if you're a member of IMDb Pro, you can look and see who the foreign sales agent was for that film, and then you could contact them. Right now, they are all kind of coming off of the craziness of Cannes. And so they're trying to figure out what deals are going to happen and what's not going to happen. But then before you know it, they're going to start ramping up for the next market. And they're always looking to have new content to take. So, again, it's just being able to
Pick up the phone.
Hustle.
Hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And finally, what about line producer? Is that something is it the right time for that?
I think it's smart to get a line producer involved sooner rather than later. If you think the script is kind of where you want it to be, to present it to potential producers to come on, or production companies, you need to know how much it's going to cost to make the movie.
Right.
Because you don't want to just start throwing out a number, and then when they go, okay, that's great, and then you actually go, actually, it's going to cost $10 million.
And I think it will also help you shop for production companies. Find production companies that make movies within this budget range,
Right.
as opposed to going to production companies that are making, Spider-Man
Right.
studios. I mean,
Studios.
yeah, find if you're really going the independent route, which I think you always need to be prepared to do because it is so hard to get studios to make anything anymore. Then find out what your budget range is so that you're not wasting your time pitching it, to people that don't even do that type of thing.
Well, and the other thing is too, because of and to kind of parlay the, going out to production companies who make these types of films in that budget range is, again, going back to the organizations, and I'll use this as an example, we have a film right now where there's a mentoring component to the movie, and I asked one of the producers, I'm like, didn't one of you tell me that you are part of the Big Brothers Big Sisters organization? And he's like, yes. And I was like, okay, great, here's your homework assignment this week. You're gonna go back to the Big Brothers and Big Sisters because you already are part of that program. I wanna know who is the highest person I can talk to in terms of helping us do a word of mouth screening for your film. And even better, I wanna talk to Denzel Washington because he's a big brother and he's played a coach, and this is a running movie. So, and they were like, okay. But it was that's kind of how my brain works even when we have films that we're releasing. And so it's to be able to have those conversations when nothing's even happened yet. I'm racing the clock right now, literally, because it's coming out soon. But if I have the ability to try and do that, but if you could do that early on and start to try to figure out, because it's always helpful to have someone of note involved in either an executive producer capacity. A lot of, more known actors are either transitioning into directing
Mm-hmm.
or they're transitioning into having production companies and they want to executive produce. And, you know, because you touch on so many topics that are, you know, speak to a lot of those types of folks, you might have some luck there too.
Okay.
And Wes, before we get to audience Q&A, you know, the Free Minds part of the Free Minds film distribution is an appreciation for human freedom and telling stories that reflect that in film. There is a component to that in your film. Can you touch briefly on that?
Yeah, there is. It's it really culminated in, there's a scene between Troy and Rebecca. I think I talked about it before, where he's about to go and wrestle for the championship. And she comes in and she basically tells him that, you know, no matter what happens out there, you have to remember, you know, it's your self-worth that matters, and what's important is how you see yourself. And she says, she makes the observation that, you know, look around you, the good that you've done, and you haven't even realized it, as far as, you know, you've gotten the entire school behind wrestling, and you've created something that hasn't been here before, and you didn't even know. And his comment was, yeah, I didn't notice. And she says, well, it's invisible, but it's there. You know, you've done it. And the inspiration for me for that scene, and really kind of throughout the whole script, was, it kind of goes back a little bit to Adam Smith's The Invisible Hand, which it talks about in the book, where, you know, as each person kind of pursues their own self-interest in life, they actually have a whole slew of people that benefit from that. And that by pursuing what you love and your self-interest, that it kind of elevates all kinds of people in different realms in life, which I think is, you know, the world of movies and actors is a perfect example for that, because when you do make a film, or you do play a role in a film, you touch lives that you'll never even know, but you can change lives that way. So to me, it's kind of that really brought, you know, an important theme that goes back to free markets and Adam Smith, The Invisible Hand.
Hearing him say that, I'm sorry to interject, but like, you really need to tap into the faith-based market too. I mean, there's definitely elements of your project that you pitched today that could fall into that.
Well, it gets a little raunchy. I don't know if it...
I mean, but I'm just telling you, you know, there's a fine line there
Yeah,
that you could
yeah.
potentially tap into, even just from a financing standpoint, let alone like how to have them help support. I mean, there's companies out there that, you know, I am constantly in awe of how well faith-based films, independently financed, do in the theatrical space. Like, I'm talking millions and millions of dollars. So, you know, it's something to think about. I mean, I haven't read the whole script, so I don't know
Well, I
how
have
raunchy
it
it
for
gets.
you.
Oh.
Name on it.
Well, how do we know it's Melanie's script?
It clearly is mine.
Lovely watermark there.
It's only on the first page, though, right?
It's on every page.
No, it's on every page.
All right.
I clearly cannot lose this.
And Mel, frankly, with that last point, you gave us our 10th point, which is a very nice way to segue into Q&A. Let me rattle through what Wes is going to do immediately after this show. Number 1, Wes, you will get a Facebook page to build that fan base. Number 2, you will get an Instagram account also to build that fan base. Number 3, Wes, you will research interest groups such as, but not limited to, childhood obesity groups, anti-obesity, I would say.
Anti-obesity.
Yeah, bullying groups, anti-bullying, Native American groups, pro wrestling. I mean, look at obesity, bullying, Native Americans, pro wrestling. I mean, you've got to, I mean, name another film that has all this.
But it's funny,
Football.
yeah, and it's funny too, you know, just writing the script.
Football.
I mean, a lot of things that happen, you know, the ideas that are in the script, you know, you've caught on to things just from the pitch, and I've had people read it and they pull something different out of the script that maybe I didn't even have an intention on providing them.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's always kind of a really rewarding thing, you know,
Yeah,
when you
that's why it's
put
great
your
to
work out.
pitch. That's why it's great to talk, because
Exactly.
people will give you ideas.
Number 4, research films that have similar fan bases. Do what they did. Copy them. Number 5, research, what would you say, positive film companies like Walden that are looking to put positive messages into the marketplace. Number 6, not as fun, but audition attorneys. get referrals from other filmmakers. Number 7.
Can be fun if you
Oh,
make it
yeah,
fun.
sure. Number 7, find a foreign sales agent. Again, ask for referrals. This was a very good suggestion. Look at comps, go to IMDb Pro, see who the foreign sales agent was in those comps and go bother them. Number 8, find a line producer because you have to know how much your movie will cost. Number 9, shop for production companies, ones that have done similar films in this space. And number 10, rounding out the top 10, research faith-based angles. With that, let us segue to the audience Q&A. Audience, start queuing.
All right, we're gonna make sure this mic works here and see if we
We've
got a
got,
question. We got a question right here.
Our trusted producer Matt in the audience who will be taking questions.
Matt Edwards, everybody.
Matt Edwards.
All right, what's your name?
David. Okay. So I guess my question is this. Let's say I finish my independent film, and I'm thinking about festivals, I'm thinking about distribution. How beneficial is it to be going to smaller film festivals, i.e. like the ones that aren't Sundance, Toronto, Cannes, that sort of thing? And also, what do I need to do as a producer to get the attention of Gravitas or a similar distribution company so that I can start talking about getting distribution?
Okay, well, the latter is I'm here, so you can talk to me afterwards.
But what if he wasn't here? What if you weren't here?
If you
Get a lawyer.
It all starts with that, yeah.
Lawyer up. Lawyer up. Lawyer up. No, I can't speak to how to approach other distribution companies because I don't work for them, but Gravitas is actually very similar to a film festival in terms of like we look at every single thing that comes to us. There's actually a submissions tab on our website that allows a filmmaker to submit their film. We require at least 2 people within our team to take a look at the movie to determine if it's something we want to get involved with. So that's for everyone in the room to know, and that's partially because of my coming from a film festival before I joined Gravitas, and I just felt that that was a really good way to, find diamonds in the rough outside of just going to the Sundances and the Torontos of the world, because filmmakers don't like to cold call, and so that made it a little bit easier for them and probably a little less scary to submit. And then in terms of the lower tier or regional film festivals, I think there's a fine line that you need to walk in terms of how many you want to do, because it can get very expensive for you as a filmmaker, and you want to be really careful to also not oversaturate the marketplace with your film when you're trying to seek out distribution. And depending on the subject matter and if it's a narrative or a documentary, there's a lot of different things to kind of factor in. A lot of times I like to use festival as a part of the word of mouth for releasing our films that we take on. So for example, I mentioned the one with the mentor component to it. We actually acquired that film through a sales agency, and it didn't have a festival play, and then I actually reached out and submitted the film to the Seattle International Film Festival because that's where the film was shot. And it just had its world premiere there. And the film got on its own accord, not my doing, but they were very supportive of the film because it made sense for them to show it. And it kind of helped me decide when to take the movie out. So I like utilizing film festivals as part of the overall strategy for the release of the movie, and trying to butt up the festivals as close to the release as possible. And the thing that everyone should be aware of, at least from Gravitas' standpoint, is we like to look at films for about 4 to 5 months out. So right now, like, we're almost programmed out through the end of the year, just so that everyone knows, like, you should start those conversations early because of the way we have to deliver to all the various platforms and just kind of the way our schedule rolls out too. So that's something a lot of filmmakers don't realize.
Great.
Next question.
Anyone else have a question back here? Just say your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Marty. And if your film already has a fan base or an interest group, for instance, with the subject matter of your film, how do you turn those fans of the subject matter into buyers for your particular film?
There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. I mean, you know, there's incentives that you can provide to them that ultimately can get them excited about wanting to do the transaction. I mean, if you did you do crowdfunding in order to build that fan base, or was this through an organization that you now have a fan base?
It's through the industry of which the film deals with. So it's a sport particularly. So the sport has many players, so we want to build on the people that are already engaged in that sport. So finding those people and then converting those people.
Converting them to, you know, it's providing them with like a taste of what the project is. So sometimes it's maybe having a influencer screening of some people in that realm that can then kind of validate the project for you, that will then encourage them to want to actually either purchase or download the film or rent it. I encourage a lot of people to do that. Another thing that you can do is you might be able to supply the film like a 10-minute preview, a free preview that gets people hooked, that then actually wants them to then purchase or download a rental of it. Those are a couple of things that we've tried of late that seem to really work. You're welcome.
Another question we have over here. I think you'll have to come up.
It's like the voice of God asking questions.
Hi, Leo. Alamo Drafthouse Cinema seems to show a lot of films they just happen to like. Is that a good way to get buzz, or would that be oversaturation?
Tim League is the gentleman behind Alamo Drafthouse. He's also the gentleman behind Fantastic Fest. He has a very hip and cool perspective on cinema, yet he also is responsible for The Act of Killing, which got nominated for an Oscar. So I actually think his overall perception of film is vast. He likes everything. It's just, I think that the Alamo Drafthouse in particular has a certain ethos that they kind of like to stick to. But you know, they like to do a lot of Grindhouse. They like to do a lot of, you know, Texas-based filmmakers. They'll do a lot of like martial arts type films. They're
Explain what
Alamo Drafthouse is a theater chain that's primarily based in Texas. They've actually started to expand to other places now too. But it's super cool because you have the ability to go in and there's like a row or a bar like right in front of each row.
Like a bar,
yeah.
like a whole string of like
yeah.
a bar. Yeah,
and there's flags that you can just be like, hey waitress, and then the waitress comes over and she, like, you've written down, just like this piece of paper, you've written down like, we want a bucket of beer, we want a pizza, and it comes to you. So it's a very, very chill, very Texas kind of way to see movies, and so I think he has to kind of show films that are appealing to that kind of fan base and that audience. It's a lot of fun. I mean, if anybody's ever been to South by Southwest, I mean, you got to go to at least one screening at one of the Alamos. But
so if your film can be enjoyed with a high blood alcohol content, that's
yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, you know, and there's certain types of genre that just work well with that kind of atmosphere that he's created. You know, anime. You know, like Quentin Tarantino type style films, and, you know, like I said, Grindhouse. But I don't think it's, you know, you mentioned oversaturation, and I don't necessarily think it's oversaturation. I mean, you know, it's funny. I don't know if it's like because they're both in Texas, but Robert Rodriguez just started a network actually called El Rey Network, and he's skewing in the same exact direction, but instead of having it in the theater, he's actually supplying it through his network, which has a deal with DirecTV, iTunes, and I think there's one other platform that has the ability to show it. And he's doing like original content, but then he's also showing like Quentin's movies. And, you know, one of my favorite old school like Asian martial arts films, Master of the Flying Guillotine, like films like that. Like, you know, it's just like where it's like super cheesy. Like, what am I watching? But it's just like that fanboy fan base is strong, and he's definitely playing to it. So.
Okay, let's see if we have another question. Yes, over here. Just say your name.
I'm Oz. So, Melanie, I'm interested in acquiring the rights to your story of smashing that broad's face through the locker. I think that's gold. We can talk about that later.
We can talk about that later.
But in terms of like distribution, so you hear about these indie films that cobble together funds from like possibly non-Hollywood people just investing, you know, 200, 500 grand or whatever, and you put together 2 million or 5 million or something like that. But the question seems to come up in those situations is like, especially if these people aren't like film industry people, it's like, well, how much am I going to make if I put this money in? And then you go to like Box Office Mojo or whatever, and it's like there's the production budget and there's the gross, but in between there is the distribution. So it's really hard to like. Is there a better resource, or how can you, in terms of comparables, like that's typically what you see. Well, you know, it costs this much, it grows this much, and so it's like, what would you recommend as the answer to that question if one is packaging something together and handling it independently
My first
that way?
answer is you're not going to make any of your money back. Because, and honestly, like, people are sometimes surprised when I tell them that that's what I tell potential investors for projects that I'm involved with, but at least then, if they don't make any money back, I wasn't lying. But honestly, it's, you know, getting involved in investing in independent film is because people who are investing in independent film are interested in entertainment versus making money back, in my opinion. And that's why there's constantly new people putting, you know, dollars into independent film that they weren't necessarily doing because they want to walk the red carpet, they want to be involved, they want to be on set. You know, it's a new and interesting and exciting thing for them. It's not necessarily like, what's the return on my investment? For those that are extremely concerned about the return on their investment, you just have to be really honest with them. You know, the information that, I mean, I think I said this at the very beginning, the reason I got involved in the distribution side of the business is for that very reason. I was like, where are all these numbers? Like, I don't have any data. Like, how am I supposed to write a business plan when I don't even know what the waterfall looks like? There's a lot of books out there that, you know, talk about the waterfall and talk about what the possibilities are. And I just, you know, I always try to tell people to err on the side of caution. Which basically means pushing down the actual production budget of the film. And then the other thing to be really aware of when you're talking with your investors is that, you know, more often than not, especially in the independent space, you're not necessarily going to sell the film for what you made it for. You might sell it for a portion of that, or you might do a completely different avenue of like revenue shared only distribution. There's so many different ways in which it kind of like the pie is cut now. That's a big reason why I was saying earlier, you really want to get a foreign sales agent involved early on because they can help kind of determine what various territories could potentially bring back to you. You know, the domestic market varies greatly. I mean, I know filmmakers who, you know, they sold their movie at Sundance for $5 million plus for a minimum guarantee, and then the P&A spend, which is print and advertising, could be anywhere from $5 to $20 million. That's, you know, then if you think about that, that means that that company, the distribution company, has to recoup the $5 million they bought the film for, plus whatever that P&A spend is, and depending on how you structured your deal, if there's interest on there, are you ever going to see a penny? So, but when you can't get a $5 million MG, like you're in really good shape. But, you know, so that's why it's really good to have a sales agent involved, not just for foreign, but for domestic too, because they can help navigate those negotiations and deals for you.
And what types of fees can you talk a little bit about, like because obviously when you make your film, then you've got to recoup, the investors' money plus their premium, right? And then any out-of-pocket expenses, right, that you, the producer, spent. And then you get into typically what's the 50-50 revenue share, right? The creative owns 50, and then the investors own 50. And the creative can split that amongst however they want with the creative team, and then the investors split their 50. Let's say you make your movie, and Focus Features wants to buy it. Can you talk a little bit about how much the sales rep charges, what their fee is, or a range, and then maybe like what a typical or just range of distribution fees?
And we'll have to end it on this question. Courtney gets the last question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we shouldn't end on my question.
Well, I mean, a lot of it's like agency fees, so it can be 10%. Sometimes it can be higher. In terms of someone who's representing your film, I've seen people get as much as 25%.
The sales rep.
The sales rep, and so that varies. The distribution and waterfall of how the money comes in can vastly vary. I mean, just to kind of give you like a quick breakdown, like if a film goes out on a cable operator for the regular standard rental price of $5, by the time the filmmakers actually, the waterfall between the cable operator and then the distribution company, and then they take their fees, and then the filmmaker gets a fee. You're probably, depending on distribution companies, you're probably looking at somewhere around $1.90, $1.95 out of that $5. So, and that's really, the thing that I think always a lot of independent filmmakers don't realize is having at least one producer on your project who really kind of understands the nuts and bolts of those types of things, because the devil is so in the details. And I've seen it happen where they're like, but we made this much money gross, but there's all these other things that are happening that you need to be aware of, like capping out distribution expenses, and it's.
Well, now Wes is aware of all these.
Yeah.
I am.
And,
thank you. Yes.
And, thank you, Wes, and thank you, Mel. And we look forward to all being invited to your premiere party, Wes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we want very good seats,
Front row.
especially me.
Front row. Yes.
Otherwise, I'll hit you.
We want you in studio and at home to visit us online at freemindsfilmdistribution.com. We've got a couple of things for you to check out. One is the guide, the Free Minds Film Distribution Guide. That's kind of a one-stop shop where you can get very concise guidance about everything from attaching celebrities to what to do about Netflix, iTunes, and so on. So go on, go to our website, click the guide, and you can download that free of charge. How about that? The other thing that's coming up is what, Courtney?
Well, if you go to our website, you will see that we have a seminar coming up at the end of July, July 26th. It's going to be on site in Los Angeles. We are not going to film it, so you can apply.
So you can curse.
We can be ourselves finally. And we will have great speakers talking about all various types of pockets of distribution. There'll be Q&As. There'll be a really intensive event, but you do have to apply and tell us the type of projects you're making. There'll be an application page on our page, so apply, and we do hope to see you in Los Angeles on July 26th.
At the Culver Hotel in beautiful downtown Culver City. Just again, go to freemindsfilmdistribution.com, and for the July 26th event, just click 2014 seminars. So goodbye from Los Angeles.
There'll be booze at that as well.
Yeah, that's I was going to say our motto is
There'll be
don't
booze.
just there'll be booze at that too. Okay, so that's our new motto. But what was our old motto? Don't just make a film. Get people to see it. Thanks very much, and good night from Los Angeles.